I'm George McEncroe. Thank you all very, very much this evening for coming along to this. This is the final in our series of births, deaths and marriages. I'd just like to take this opportunity to ask you to turn off your mobile phones in case you haven't already done so, and to introduce our wonderful panel this evening. We will start with Nellie Thomas here immediately. Nellie Thomas is a brilliant comedian, an award-winning performer, and was listed as one of Australia's most innovative thinkers in the ages of The Zone, featured on the ABC's Big Ideas. She has released DVDs, The Talk, a sexual health and ethics DVD for teens, and released her first book, What Women Want, with Random House in 2012. It's a brilliant read. To popular and critical acclaim in the same year. She also squeezed out her second human. Well done.
That I did.
Not as much fanfare, but she's a ripper too, I tell you. I like a quality
right back
kid.
In shape too.
That's right. Nellie continues to do live work in the community and government sectors, particularly as a highly sought after speaker and MC, specialising in social commentary, health promotion and women's and adolescent issues. And, cop this, she was once an under-13s girls regional BMX champion. Woo! There you go. And also, I have to mention this because you would be kicking yourself if you missed out. Nellie has got a comedy festival show coming up in next year's festival called Nellie Thomas is Pleasantly Furious. Would you please make very welcome Nellie Thomas?
Thank you. Thank you, George. Hello.
Next we have Sabina Reid, who I came to know through her work on 3AW and on The Circle. Sabina is a psychologist who consults with individuals, couples, children, families, organisations. She's trained as a phone counsellor and experienced facilitator of groups and workshops on topics including wellbeing, sleep, parenting, grief, anxiety and eating disorders. Sabina is the resident psychologist and commentator on 3AW's Afternoons program and regularly contributes to The Morning Show, The Daily Edition, and is listed on the National Media Referral Database for the Australian Psychological Society. Sabina is passionate about addressing the universality of the human experience, and she does so beautifully and brings joy wherever she goes. Please make welcome Sabina Reid. Sue Yorston commenced with Relationships Australia Victoria as manager of the Ballarat Centre and was recently appointed to the role of Senior Manager, Social Inclusion and Diversity. In this role, Sue is responsible for helping Relationships Australia Victoria to tailor its services to better meet the needs of all people of Victoria, as well as developing new opportunities. Relationships Australia is a leading provider of relationship support services for individuals, families and communities. It aims to support all people in Australia to achieve positive and respectful relationships. Sue has a broad career as a consultant in community services, having worked across multiple sectors to develop and manage projects across all levels of government, with a focus on innovative service development. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, Sue. Sue Yorston. Okay.
Do I get to read yours out?
No.
Oh.
Enough said about me. The less said about me, the better, actually. So I've been married. I am married currently to my first husband. And you are not Nellie Thomas.
No.
Not married to my husband or anyone else's husband.
No.
Or even your own.
Not yet.
Not yet. Why did you say no to marriage?
Oh, my Lord. That's
Come on.
A big one to start on, isn't it? Look, I think I may be Robinson Crusoe in the room. I don't know. Is there anyone else not married but in a relationship? Okay. If you,
they're those
good.
de factos.
That's my people. I think there's a few reasons to join an institution, which is what marriage is.
Yep.
And you join it because you agree with the values of that institution, or you identify with the history, or you like the uniform.
Right, okay.
Right? In terms of the values, as far as I'm concerned, marriage, even in modern times, is discriminatory. Mm-hmm. Any of our gay and lesbian friends in the audience will attest to that. In terms of its history, it is very much rooted in a sort of patriarchal, religious history connected to property and the viewing of women as property. And in terms of the uniform, no one looks good in tulle. So I guess for all of those reasons, I kind of feel like it's a redundant institution. And I can say in all honesty, and I know that there'll be very divergent views in the room, and I'm sure on the panel. But I honestly don't understand why a woman in the 21st century in a first world country like Australia would choose that institution. I don't get it.
Thank you. Sue Yorston, is marriage a bad place to be for women or anyone else?
I think it's how you enter into it. If you enter into it as a partnership and a commitment, that's fine. For some people, marriage is what they want. For others, you know, they wouldn't, like you say, they wouldn't even go there. But I think it's about... I think sometimes it's about the dream as well, you know, about what the unrealistic expectations are. You know, like lots of little girls want that day with the white dress and everything that goes with it. And for some people, they don't look beyond that, you know, that's the end, is falling in love. Falling in love does wonderful things to our brain. It just mucks everything up, and we make lots of decisions that we mightn't if we weren't so in love. But when we are in love, we have our rose-coloured glasses on and the world is wonderful and we have this wonderful future.
And do you think marriage will go the distance? Do you think it is an institution that fewer and fewer people are opting into, or do you think it is just a perennial, like birth, death and marriage? Is marriage one of those things that perhaps people will be able to avoid and do so in greater numbers?
I think there'll always be people who choose to be married, who see that as the, you know, the ultimate commitment and expression of that commitment, and that's what they want.
Do you believe, Sabina, I'll go to you, you see a lot of clients from a range of backgrounds. Do you see personally and anecdotally that marriage is a happy, healthy place for most people? I guess by the time they come into you, things have already turned to shit somewhat.
They don't come in to see me to tell me how great their marriage is. So
just popping in, Sabina, just so you know, top of the pops with that.
I mean, we know that almost 50% of marriages end in divorce. Mm-hmm. And when you think about those stats, imagine saying to everyone, who would like to go skydiving? Now, 50% of you are going to die, but 50% of you are going to have a wild ride and it's going to be heaps of fun, and, you know, who wants to get on board? I wonder how many people would take the flight.
And it's going to cost you $50,000.
At least.
But you'll get some towels.
And a toaster.
I mean, the other side of that is there's a lot of people go back for a second and third and even a fourth go.
Well, this is what amazes me. So in your years of dealing with couples, and Sabina, you'll be able to answer this as well, what is it with the marriage train that once people get on that they don't go, you know what, I'm really no good at this, I will just give it up, you know, but they do keep coming back. What is it with that? What are they trying to get?
I think a lot of it's just our ingrained values and expectations. You know, that's the ultimate in life. You know, when I got married when I was 18, there wasn't any other choice really for me. If I wanted to be with this man, then there was only one path to go on to make that happen, and still be valued, I suppose, by my family. If I'd chosen any other way, it would have been against my religion, you know, against the values of the time.
But those pressures don't exist anymore, and it is interesting.
But...
Oh, yes, I think they do.
They do. I think they do. I think they do. I think, you know, when you look at you know, the happy ever after stories are still there. They might have a modern connotation to them, but at the end of the book or the end of the story, they still connect, end up together, kissing. Off we go into the sunset.
Do you find it interesting, though, that when people had fewer options, you couldn't have sex before you were married, if you wanted to shag someone...
I didn't say that.
No. You were 18. I was just making assumptions. Horrified. Get me the smelling salts, please, Seb. Somebody here, premarital sex. No, but if you do...
You are actually blushing.
I know. Wish I thought of doing that. No, but people...
There's still time, George.
People now, you would think if you do go the de facto, you know, the try before you buy kind of thing, which my mother was very fond of saying as her children, one after another, shacked up with somebody, only to not marry them. And, you know, you'd say, well, then, surely then, if you've had that opportunity, if you have had more sexual freedom than the previous generation, why do people still end up marrying the wrong people, or the marriages don't work? What is going wrong in marriages today?
This sounds like a joke, but it's not. Mm-hmm. I mean, marriage isn't about sex.
No.
Is it really? It's not about... I mean, is it just me?
Well, no, sex is a really interesting thing that I really want to come to. Well, you're not married, so you can't talk.
No,
and you can have sex.
It doesn't make any difference, I'm not going to tell you. But in all honesty, I think, I mean, if we're talking about marriage as an institution, which is where I started, I'm talking about the technical, actually signing the contract, which in Australia is with the government. Yeah. I don't get that. Like, why you'd want the government involved in your relationship is beyond me.
Because they're so great. Oh,
because
no, that's
they're
right.
so good at everything else that they
Yeah.
really come in and make that really romantic. But in terms of a long-term commitment, which I'm in a monogamous 14-year relationship, I get that part of it. Obviously, I assume both the psychologists would tell us initially it might be all about sex. But over time, it clearly isn't.
No, I would agree.
But don't you think sex, though, is the one thing that defines your marital relationship from other friendships that you have with other people? The fact that you probably shouldn't be having sex with others. That's the only person you've got a green light to shag, really. That's what I'm saying.
But intimacy comes in so many different ways in relationships, and sex is only one of those. I think what's the reason why people are still hung up on the idea of marriage is the dream of being understood by someone else in the world. Someone else gets me, someone else sees me, someone else understands me, likes me with my stretch marks and my hangovers, and that's what we're all seeking.
And my mum's busy. I can't move back in with her. Better marry this guy.
But so that goes well beyond sex, doesn't it?
Yes.
That real connection. I mean, we're as humans, we want to connect to people, and to connect to one person is something we aspire to, whether we can, whether that's a reality or not, because of course we were all dead by the time we were 40 when marriage was introduced.
Right, yes, of course. That's right. It was only meant to go a certain number of years, enough to pop out a few kids and then see you later.
Off you go. And I think those competing impulses are really interesting, what we've spoken about in terms of that kind of natural human instinct, if you want to call it that, to cohabit with someone, to have someone understand you, to have a companion, to love you. But is that not in direct competition with the natural instinct to sleep around?
Well, I don't know. I'm blushing again.
That's right.
Women are brought up on this panel.
If the statistics are true, and I'm Anisha, I mean, I'm not the statistician up here, but there are a lot of people, clearly, who are not satisfied with monogamy.
Absolutely.
And not make monogamy work.
And scientists would also argue that in terms of benefits for the species, we should have every child by a different coupling, because you get the broadest genetic, diversity.
All right. We need to all go out tonight and do
so
something.
that's us this evening. We're off down the pub, guys. No, but what role, though, does sex have in keeping marriages or any relationship together? I mean, there's been this big push of the sort of surrendered wife notion that comes out every couple of years. Someone will publish something saying, look, I know you won't like it, but have sex with your spouse, and it's usually directed to women, with the assumption that all men want to have sex all the time, which is probably deeply offensive and incorrect for many men. But that idea that if you just submit to that, then everything else will flow. I mean, how crucial is the sexual activity in a marriage to deciding its longevity or its health?
I think the reality is that a vibrant relationship actually changes over time. So while, we might start out in lust, that's got to move to commitment, and then it moves to companionship. So for me, the ideal relationship is one that has that flexibility. So when I was young and having children, I needed someone who could protect me while I was nurturing and, do all the things, be the breadwinner, whatever, but I needed to be in that safe space. And then as the children got older, I needed someone who was more my equal and could allow me to have the freedoms that I hadn't been able to have before, and to be able to move with me in that. And then now as I'm older, I need someone who I can just share the quiet times with and have that companion with, and that security and that safety. So I think I can only speak for me as a woman, but certainly that's how I see it, that the relationships need to change over time. And I think for some people, they're very, very lucky and very, very special if they can get that in the one committed, ongoing relationship. But for a lot of us, it doesn't work out that way. And mine fell down in that middle bit when I wasn't given the freedom to fly the way that I wanted to.
And do you think that is the trickiest bit for couples transitioning from one phase into the next? Yep. Because a lot of people will say, oh, look, your 40s are the most difficult. You know, people in their 70s or whatever, but that passes. But it doesn't always... People don't always get there.
No, because they've lost the connection along the way. If you're busy with, you know, I had 5 children and running a farm.
Wow.
So I was busy, you know, and my husband was busy as well. So we're all busy. And you know, you've got to make that time to keep that continuous connection and checking in. And are we still on the same life goals, or is your life goals... See, my life goal changed.
Right.
It changed, and my husband wasn't able to accommodate that. And I suppose if we hadn't, over the years, made the space available to keep checking in with that, you know, my needs changed, and he wasn't up with it.
And children are a big part of that too, because when you first get together with someone, there are usually no children in the picture, not shared children. You might have children from other relationships. But I think as a culture, we now are we're almost putting our children before our relationships, and then wondering why our relationships aren't sustainable.
Yeah.
And that's almost a politically incorrect or socially incorrect thing to say, isn't it? Because we're meant to be giving everything to our little darlings. But how can the adult relationship, you know, continue to thrive when we don't feed it?
But is that the tension, though, for couples now? There is so much anxiety around child rearing and so much judgment, you know, if anything goes wrong, if your poor child falls in a pool or, you know, God help you, something else terrible happens, there does seem to me this incredible community response of judgment and blaming, and as well as a sort of a legal system that supports that. I mean, parents didn't automatically go to saying, you know what, I'm going to ruin my marriage for the sake of the kids.
Well, you're not feeling particularly sexual if you're trying to be perfect,
no.
Are you? I mean, if you're worried constantly that you're being judged or analysed, I mean, it's not very sexy in a relationship, is it?
No, it's look. Well, I'd love to start with you, Sue, about what are the keys, do you think, to keeping marriages happy, healthy, functioning, and what is the sort of canary in the mine that tells you that perhaps this is in trouble?
Starting with the bad end first, I suppose. For people who come to us for some counselling, what the counsellors are looking for when they're doing this assessment is what we call the hope in the relationship. So they often come in. So one of the things that you're looking for is the level of contempt. You know, people talking contemptuously of each other, that's often a real indicator that there's not much hope for this relationship. It's sort of gone beyond that. But even within that, when we're talking individually to the couple and talking to them together, we're looking for what I call the hope in the relationship. So we might talk to them about, you know, how they met, what attracted them to each other in the first place, and looking for how they react to that, you know, in there. If you get a little bit of a glimmer there and that sort of thing, you go, there it is, and there's the hope, and you start to work with that. But one of the joys that our counsellors have, and they've said to this more than once, is, and I had one say it to me recently, she said, I just love it when couples come in for a checkup.
Right.
So not leaving it until it's, you know, critical. You know, if you don't come to counselling, I'm going to leave, and pointing the finger. But coming in for a checkup, how are we going? You know, just sort of checking in with that third independent person who's not emotionally involved about how we're going. It's about being able to do that, and also checking. And I know it sounds sort of old hat now, but date nights will never ever go out of fashion. You need to make time to be together on your own. We'd have some couples who would go, you know, a weekend away at least once or twice a year. No kids, just us, just talk. And it's in that talking that you're checking in again around those life goals, what's changed, and being alert and aware of that and accommodating those changes.
So, and that's what you think too, Sabina, that's the magic.
Research shows that most couples wait 6 years, not 6 years of marriage or being together, but 6 years of struggle before they seek help. So by the time they have sought help, they really are in a difficult place, and there is low hope, as Sue says. We know that sort of between 5 and 7 years that a lot of relationships, or marriages and relationships struggle between 5 and 7 years with conflict, and then again between 10 and 12 years with a lack of intimacy. So they're two critical periods in the long-term relationship trajectory.
Yeah.
And I think it helps to be aware, because then when you're, bitching and moaning at the 5 to 7 year mark, at least you're not the only ones doing it.
Yeah.
At the 10 to 12 year mark, when you're feeling there's a lack of connection, a lack of intimacy, you can be aware that as humans, it's not an unusual pattern to find yourself in that place. I would say around the date night, people talk date nights all the time, and I speak to clients about date nights a lot. My concern with setting up regular date nights and regular time together is if you don't have the skills and the tools or the hope or the desire to connect and to be together, then that's going to be a pretty tricky time over, with the lazy Susan at the Chinese restaurant.
Yeah.
I know.
It's those couples with the plastic flowers between them, and say it's awful.
I could be home watching Dancing with the Stars.
Yeah, that's all they're thinking. Yeah.
Or The Bachelor.
Now she reveals.
Yeah, right.
Well, I picked up The Age this morning. Well, I didn't pick it up. I was looking online at The Age, and I saw, thinking about tonight, I saw 3 articles that caught my attention. And when you read The Age online, or when you read a newspaper online, it says how many people are reading this at the moment.
Yeah.
So Rupert and Wendy's $1.7 billion divorce, 550 people were reading. How The Bachelor ended up last night on Channel 10, 350 or something. And then there was another little article I saw, and the title was How to Move from Casual to a Committed Relationship. 19 people were reading that.
Yeah, they're all too busy watching The Bachelor. Well, that relationship is a great case in point. I mean, that'll go really well, won't it? Coming together that
All
way.
those TV ones do.
Getting engaged on the television. And
I saw a great... this is just a lay perspective. Obviously, I don't have clients to talk to about it.
You've got mates, though.
Yeah, I saw a fantastic couple who were in their 90s. It was on Oprah. All right, I do watch a lot of TV. And they had been married for 70 years.
Right.
Which is phenomenal. And she said to them, as you'd expect Oprah to do, what's the secret to your relationship? And the woman actually said, which I thought was just about the most romantic thing I'd ever heard, she said, we were never out of love at the same time.
Okay.
And I thought that was so lovely in the sense that she acknowledged that it's not all bells and whistles and bloody romance and flowers for 70 bloody years.
Yeah.
But that it does come and go. And whether that's about sex, whether it's about intimacy, whether it's about your finances, your connection, whatever it is, I think if you have that expectation that it's going to be up here constantly, the first roadblock that you hit, you throw it out.
Yeah.
Whereas if you know that about 10 years that happens, or about 7 years...
I don't know what happens at 70 years. My grandparents, my grandmother's 104.
Just got divorced.
No. Sorry. She wouldn't get divorced because my grandfather's 98, so she's got herself a toy boy. And they have been married for 70 years. They have been married for 70 years. So I have
Do they like each other?
Yeah, they piss each other off. They drive each other bonkers, but they are a soft place to fall for each other.
Because this is the other thing I find astounding, that we still have this...
I hope they're not in the audience. They're not here, are they?
They're pashing outside. No, they're not.
That automatic assumption that longevity is a good thing. We all have seen relationships, I'm sure, whether in our families or in our communities, where people have stayed together and hate each other and have made each other and everyone around them miserable. Yeah. But you know what? We got to our 40th anniversary. To me, that's not a victory.
No. Now, how do you... Well, that brings me to the next question, which is when do you know this relationship's a dead man walking, and what sort of guidance do you give to people? How do people know?
Look, I mean, people actually... Well, people do know. I mean, my experience is that usually when a couple comes in for counselling, almost one of them is looking out the window or, quite obviously not wanting to be there because they don't want to be in the relationship. So it makes it very difficult to work with a couple when one has already made the decision. And I think you find that as individuals, we don't neatly march along the same path at the same time. And usually by the time one has got to that point, they've almost, mentally left the relationship.
How are they coming
They
then?
left along.
Well, the other one often is saying, we can work this out now. Or,
Right.
or
Even when they've checked out, they think I'll go, so I'm not the bad guy or the bad girl.
We have couples come in, and in the room, one announces to the other, "I'm leaving you, and I'll leave now, and you're in the care of the counsellor, so you'll be fine."
Oh, good
I constantly
one.
find this amazing.
So
I'm
that's
sure
the
you
wrong
have
thing
this.
to do. Don't do that. I'm just checking in there. Don't do that.
Don't you find it incredible whenever you tell people, I'm sure you get this, whenever you tell people you're a comedian, invariably they'll say one of two things, tell me a joke, or that is the hardest job in the world. I think no one's ever going to do that to either of us.
Not for long.
We've been married for 30 years, catch her. Just look after him, Nellie. Oh my Lord.
That is really tough. So what do you do then in that situation? I'd love to know.
Well, usually the party that wants to goes, and then the counsellor will start to do some work with that other person that's left there, which is really inviting them to come back in for some further sessions. So I think it's that person that's left that is experiencing the grief, the grief and the lost relationship. So it's shock, a whole lot of emotions that they're going through in all sorts of ways, and a lot of emotions maybe on the one day. There's no sort of set pattern for it. But I think it's what you were saying, that the person that's made the decision to leave, when they announce it, they made that decision a long time ago. Sometimes years and years and years ago. But there's lots of reasons that keep them there. I mean, one is the children. They stay together for the children. Doesn't work.
No.
And don't think it doesn't harm the children. Don't think that when my children are teenagers, then I'll go, because that's actually a really, really bad time.
Yeah.
Because your children, when they're really young, they can actually repair. If they've got, good ongoing nurturing and relationships with family, then they'll repair. It's a life just shifts, and it's a new life, and they get used to it. But they're adaptable. But for teenagers, they're separating from family anyway. Like with their brain development, they're starting to separate and move to their peers. And if their parents separate at that time, there's no solid ground for them to fall back on.
And yet that seems to be the
that's
time.
The myth, the fallacy is, the myth is that, I'll stay for the children until the children are teenagers.
But that does seem to be, from what you were saying earlier, that the time when couples are most making that shift from safe, nurturing, nesting phase into I want more. So they're trying to make that transition right as their kids are teenagers. Good one, God. Got that one wrong.
But I think going back to that initial question about, the cultural pressure, I think there is still an enormous amount of cultural pressure to stay together in heterosexual relationships.
It's still
that have
the
children.
Ideal. It's always the ideal.
There's a lot of family and social pressure to do that. And I think I can only speak from the point of view of a woman, there's a lot of pressure on women to keep the family together at any cost to yourself, or to keep the children happy at any cost. And I think it's really destructive. I mean, I find it quite incredible that we're still there culturally to the degree that we are, given that we've had so much change.
Well, people must derive a lot from it still. I mean, it's not just cultural pressure. There is something that is positive. I mean, they say, I know every year you read things in the paper saying that married people have happier lives, greater longevity, better health, particularly for men.
But so do people that own Labradors.
Yeah.
Oh, is that right?
And they don't do more housework.
Wish someone had told me that in 1996. Buy a Labrador.
The other thing you read regularly, and I'm sure we've all seen, similar things, and it is a fact, it's not about perception. Women who are married do 7 hours per week more housework than if they were single. So not only is the housework not divided, it's actually increased from having a partnership.
So how often does the housework... I mean, I know it always sounds so tedious. People get on and say, who does the dishes and who puts down the toilet seat, and, that's so sort of dull. And yet it is the stuff that can make you want to drive a knife through your spouse's heart while he's enjoying his after-dinner cup of tea.
Just pick the towels up.
But is that... How big is that division of labour still? And the other question with that, I guess, is how has feminism affected marriages?
Well, I think feminism has affected marriages because women have, so many more options now with education and work and independence and financial independence. And with regards to the toilet seat and those issues, look, if I encourage couples to talk about that, I could have people talking for 20 hours a day on those issues. And we know that although we all like to have a little, vent about those things, it's actually not what I always laugh and say, is it the knives up or the knives down in the dishwasher? Because, gee, that's a big one out there, I know. Yeah, I should be able to advise on that. I'm still stuck.
Who leaves the knives up?
Oh, so, don't get me
started. My husband leaves the knives up, but that's a different topic.
If somebody falls into that dishwasher, they could die. Does he know that? Is he trying to kill people?
He thinks they get
Your
cleaned better.
Is so annoying.
So we know that it's not really about who puts the rubbish out and which way the knives go up, but the process of how we talk about that and how we hear each other and why is that? Help me understand. Tell me about why that's important to you. And he would say, because I think they get cleaned better when they're up. And then, if I can make sense of that, even if I don't agree with it, I can think, okay,
I can
up
wear
they
that.
go.
So is that usually a stalking horse for a bigger issue, do you think? That,
I think
he's complaining about who puts the rubbish out?
Well, not necessarily. I think it's just about hear my perspective. I just want you to hear I want you to, what we call validate, which doesn't mean to agree, but just to get it.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's important to you. It's
wrong,
not important to me.
Good on you, that's fine.
they definitely go down. But if that's important, if that's how you...
No, that wouldn't be annoying at all. I really hear you about the knives.
Yeah, I hear you in your wrongness.
But
I wish you luck with it.
It sounds almost unrealistic, and yet we know that as humans, that is what we all want.
I know.
We want to be understood. We don't want everyone to say, you are right, absolutely, you've got that right. I don't think that's what we need. We just want to be, I get it. I can make sense that that's your experience and that's how you perceive.
And you don't really believe that a marriage actually comes unstuck because of the toilet seat or the toothpaste or those are the things that get mentioned in counselling, but they represent... a whole range of other things.
In underneath that.
Surely, that issue, because it's so easy to trivialise things that are actually very significant, over time. Isn't that issue fundamentally about not just respect, but about fairness?
Equity in the home.
When you say, has feminism changed marriages? I hope so. I hope it has, because it wasn't fair. So, it's still not quite fair.
Well, that's what I was going to say.
But it's fairer, and that's a good thing. For our grandmothers, for example, your grandmother is 104, my nana died last year at 97, no question that they would have spent their lives dedicated to housework and children, regardless of their talents and abilities and desires. So, good. I'm glad we're not there.
Well, when my grandmother's best friend's husband dropped dead at 45 and her friend remarried, my grandma said that is like spitting in the eye of God. Imagine being blessed being a young widow and then remarrying. Why would anyone do that? She was furious with her friend Eiley. Oh, why would Eiley have done that?
So you could have lived with the social grace.
She said she got out.
Yeah, you got
this
out.
was like marriage lotto.
Wow.
Oh, and she bloody blew the lot. Anyhow, so, and that was her generation. Her life was literally chopping up the wood to make the boiler and, Monday washes and all that stuff. It was very physically hard, no car, and very little money and very tough times. But I think, too, the expectations perhaps of... It seems to me that women have expectations that have grown according to education, health, every other index that you can have. And yet there seems to be sort of a generation of men who are perhaps... without a role model of how to do a modern, more equitable marriage, and that there seems to be some disconnect there. Have you seen generational change or men sort of caught between the shift?
I think there's generational change now. Like, young couples that I know, there's far more equity, and I know, just in my children, he does the cooking. She wouldn't even think about it. He just does it. He likes it and he does it. I think so. I think in we say like the X and Y generation, whatever. There's far more acknowledgement of who has the skill to do what and the time and the sharing. And another young couple that I know, she was earning three figure, some whatever it is, over 100,000, and he was earning under. So when they had their children, she stayed home, and then he stayed home. He stayed home over 12 months with them. Right. Because he was earning less than she was.
So it wasn't a gender decision,
no,
it was a practical decision.
It was practical, but it was a team decision.
And that's sort of key to it all, isn't it? But I think there was that generation of women who were married to men who really did like the old system. Really, I would like a meal on the table when I get in the door and a game of golf all day Saturday.
And ideally, if we could have these conversations before we enter into marriage... but at that point we're all gaga and falling all over each other and having a lot of sex, that we don't think about, which way the knives should go and who's going to cook dinner and, who's going to do the child rearing and the gardening, and we don't talk about those things. So how can we navigate that when we haven't had that conversation?
But also when so many of those models are subconscious too. So I think there's a generation of gentlemen who are sort of between 40 and 50 now whose fathers... came home from work and had it all. That as long as they had a job and didn't beat anyone, they were kind of top dads and fathers, and that's all you could ask for.
Some things you actually can't anticipate. Yeah. Like I remember being shocked, for example, in my own relationship when I started buying presents for my partner's mum and sister and dad at Christmas and birthdays and stuff. And I remember sitting there going at one point, why am I doing this? And I said to him, why are we doing when I say we, me, why am I running around doing this for Christmas? And he's like, just don't do it. And I was furious. I was like, I understand where you're coming from, but actually the cultural expectations are on me. Yep. Your mum is not going to ring you and say, you didn't remember Christmas. No. There is an assumption that the woman in the household, if there's a male and female, will take care of those things. And as much as you try and resist that pressure, it really shocked me how invested I was in it.
Yeah, sucking up to his family.
Yeah, pretty much. Or not getting the blowback, if you like.
No.
You know what I mean? There's still those kind of unwritten rules.
And that's what I was talking about, sort of the implicit role modelling that we've had that then doesn't meet up with the person you're actually with and their backstory.
You send one of your kids to school with knits and no shoes, it's not the dad they're going to be asking what happened.
No. And that's really infuriating when the mother of the household goes away and the kids go to school.
Even if she's working 60 hours a week.
But a whole lot of women will come and give him notices and say, you may not know, but it's icy pole day tomorrow, or even bring him food, which is always great.
Absolutely. I remember Lachlan saying when we had our first child, and he used to get up in the morning and go walking, so that I could sleep in, which was very nice. When I say sleep in, to 5:30, and literally, and he was walking the streets of Preston, and he would literally have people stop him and say, "Oh, you are so great!
Yeah. Look at you babysitting like that." Yeah.
I'd go down to Woolworths or something. You can just tell they go, "Look at her in her tracksuit pants."
She's given up. She's given up.
She's given up. She'll let herself go.
She'll never get a second husband at that
rate.
George's husband.
You used a key word then, George, and that's our sort of ingrained, I suppose, that dad babysits. Yeah. Dads don't babysit. Other people babysit. Dads should never babysit. But that's the terms that we use. That's the language that we use. Dad's babysitting so mum can go out on Saturday.
Well, I'd be working gigs and people say, is your husband home babysitting the kids?
Yeah, no,
they're his kids.
They're his kids.
At home in his house with the humans he made. That's what he's doing.
I just didn't know they're in the car. They're fine. Windows down.
Look,
they'll be right.
we are getting close to time. We'll just spend a couple of minutes talking to you, Sue, about when it all turns to poo. Yeah. The state is involved, as Nellie pointed out. Dennis Napthine is on the end of your bed in your marriage. The government is part of this institution. I know that's a sexy thought. Look out, population boomed 9 months down the track. So it is a government enterprise. What do people not know about the intricacies of getting divorced that they should know?
Well, that's a tough one. Because most people know about divorce from their friends and what their friends have been through. When they are announcing that they're separating, they get lots and lots of advice from their friends. One of the things that I think is key is to go slow and take your time. Nothing has to be done in a rush. Nothing has to be signed tomorrow. Nothing has to be decided immediately. So it's about actually taking some time to acknowledge that you are going through a grieving process. It is a shock. It also depends on why the separation happened. So, you know, if he comes to you and says, you know, I've just met the love of my life, I'm out of here, you know, that's quite different to a couple who have actually maybe worked through the process and agreed that it's time to go their separate ways. So for some people it is an enormous shock, for others it's not. But whatever, it's still an enormous change. It's up there in the top half dozen of adverse life events that can really throw us off kilter. So, you know, for me the critical thing would be to say to just take your time. You don't need to make any decisions in a hurry.
And what about grandparents and other interests? There's a lot of interest in couples staying together, particularly if they're frightened that children are going to be sent interstate or, you know, perhaps overseas. What role and rights do grandparents have to have access to children after a divorce?
Well, within law, when couples separate, and it's not, you know, whether they're married or not, if they've got children, then they have to come to some agreement about how they're going to share the parenting of those children. If they're not able to do that, then they can come to places like a family relationship centre, of which we have some, where they can actually sit down with a mediator and help to negotiate an outcome for that's in the best interest of the children. So what do the children need now? And so sometimes within that environment we have grandparents also contact us and say that they want to be part of the mediation process so that they actually can have some access time with the children. And it varies between the genders. So often we find that when Dad has his access time, like spends time with the children, he'll, you know, take them to see, you know, his family and spend some time with grandmother and grandfather, and the same for the female, you know, whatever gender it is, that side of it as well. So it sort of happens that way. Where it becomes more nitty-gritty is, as you say, when one moves away or one denies, you know, they want it in the plan that they're not to go and see, you know, your parents and that sort of thing. So it's about a control and power issue as well. So grandparents do have rights in law. They have legal rights in law. So when people come in for mediation, if they're not able to reach an agreement, they can then approach the court to resolve the conflict for them, but they can't approach court until they've attempted mediation as well. So for grandparents, the legal situation is that if they've had an ongoing substantial relationship with the child, so maybe they've been providing care while the parents have been at work and they've had an ongoing, you know, relationship with the child, then the court will take that into account when they're deciding what, you know, who's going to spend time with the child and children and when. But if the grandparent hasn't had that substantial engagement with the children, the court's not interested if you've just decided, well, I see them 3 or 4 times a year, you know, and now I'm putting my hand up to say I want to keep seeing them. It's got to be that they've had some substantial attachment to that child.
Oh, it's so challenging, isn't it, for you? Yes.
I'd love to say, because, you know, the topic that we were talking about was marriage, not divorce.
Yeah.
And so although, you know, some, as I said, almost 50% end up in divorce, I think it's important to look at what is working, not just what's not working.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think as a species, we're very intolerant of difficult feelings, of hurt, of pain, of struggle, and yet, you know, that's what we've signed up for when we came down the birth canal, unfortunately, every single one of us to some degree, and that doesn't change when we're married.
No.
So I like the idea of thinking that in every marriage there's going to be some struggle, some pain, some hurt, some heartache, some, you know, misunderstanding, but divorce brings a hell of a lot of pain too. So just, I guess, to be realistic about how can we learn to sit with some of the challenges and the pain that goes with being human, and being 2 humans means that sometimes a double whammy than just 1 human.
Yeah.
But there's a lot to be gained as well from that. So just, you know, I wouldn't want to end the conversation on how do we get the grandparents.
Knew we had to sort of cover off on that as well, because it is the all-encompassing thing, and it is a big part of it. But
there's pain in marriage and there's pain in divorce.
Oh, yeah. There's
joy in marriage, there's actually there is joy in divorce. I mean, I'm thinking about a client I've just seen who is literally high-fiving all around Melbourne because she is just feeling $1 million, and she really has found, hear me raw woman sort of, she's feeling amazing. She really is feeling amazing.
Yeah.
So there, you know...
But I guess the point of this discussion too is to also look at what keeps a relationship healthy. When do you know that it's in trouble?
Yeah.
How often should you be having sex?
And
Nellie says not at all, but she's not married, so she doesn't have to worry about it.
It's that, no, that's not what I said. I said it was the most important thing. But that balancing act thing, I think, is really important too. I don't know, I'm sure there must be other people in the room who've had this experience, that I think when you're very young, particularly in your teenage years and your early 20s, that really tumultuous relationship, certainly for me, was extremely attractive. I thought that's what romance was. It's exciting, it's
dramatic.
sexy, it's dramatic, all of that kind of stuff. And I guess over time you realise that, you know, trying to do that while you're trying to pick out your bloody health insurance, it gets a little tiring, you know. And it's, yes, you have pain and difficulty in all relationships, but it's how much pain and how much difficulty do you have within that relationship.
Yeah, and how much works for you? How much is going to be too much? How much can you tolerate? I guess so. Yeah, it's a fact that a lot of that, you know, two people together is a complicated path. So it doesn't work for everyone.
That's what we should have called this. Two people together is a complicated path. Look, we have to finish speaking so that you guys, we've got about 10 minutes where you can ask questions from the floor if you would like to put a question to Sue or Sabina or Nellie, who've been fantastic, by the way. Thank you. Any questions for the panel? I'll be Tony Jones. This gentleman up here had his hand up in the front row. Sorry, can we get a mic to this chap?
I'm a veteran of 42 years of love affair.
With the one woman, you mean?
With the one woman. What I just wanted to ask is, there's so many, all talked about problems with marriage. I was wondering why gays and lesbians want to get married so much.
You'd have to ask one of them, I think. Yeah. Look, I think it is the idea that you are being given equal weight and equal respect by the state, and I think the idea of being told that you are excluded from a particular rite of passage as a human being is upsetting.
Everyone should have equal right to reject the institution of marriage, as far as I'm concerned. But I mean, obviously, I've started off by saying I'm not a fan of the institution. I'm also in a love affair, not 40 years, but I hope to get to that point. I'm not a fan of the institution, but I do think that's not my choice to make. You know, anyone, I do not understand why we don't have same-sex marriage. I don't get it.
Because do you feel like it would diminish your relationship if gay and lesbian people were able to get married?
No, I don't think so. It makes no difference. You know, as long as people are happy together, that's the main thing.
And respect.
Although if you've got Dennis Napthine at the end of your bed, as George has said.
No, it's Mr. Abbott, because
Mr. Abbott, it's a federal. It's a Commonwealth Act. Correct, sir. Well done.
That's a step
even
too far,
sexier again. Those little budgie smugglers on, and off we go. Anyone else with a question? Yes, sorry, madam. It's hard to see you there.
I don't actually have a question. I just wanted to make a couple of comments. One was sort of directed at a comment that you made, Nellie, around why do women stay? And for me, it was the fear of, am I going to be able to do it on my own with two small children? And then, you know, and going through a process of realising and getting to a point where I don't want to wake up when I'm 50 and actually be in the situation that I'm in, and then 6 years later find that, yes, I could do it, and why didn't I do it a long time ago? So I'm actually one of those women who I found separating and divorce extremely liberating, and I'd never go back again. And then just a comment, just in relation to what your grandmother said, George, around a woman who was
widowed early.
So, some people need to be in a relationship, so you know, but regardless of whether they're a man or a woman, they can't be on their own, and so they need to be with somebody. So that's probably why she got married again.
Yes.
I'm with your grandmother. I sort of don't quite get it, but you know, I also have friends who can't be on their own, and I've also got friends who have got wonderful relationships and wonderful marriages. So
yeah, look,
I don't know what the answer is.
It's a really interesting point, actually. It's one of the things when I've talked about on the ABC or on AW, one of the key griefs for children who've lost a parent is when their parents and it does seem just anecdotally that a lot of men seem to remarry within 6 to 8 or repartner within 6 to 8 months of their... And in some cases, 6 to 8 weeks, as a friend of mine had happen. That was nice.
Can I just say, just very briefly, I was being somewhat facetious in the sense that I absolutely understand the reason both men and women don't leave relationships. I really do, and I think there's still... I guess the point I was trying to make is there's still so much cultural pressure. And I actually think we're at a point now, it's almost like we've forgotten to value their choice. You know, that we do actually... It's a good thing that we see so many opinion pieces and so on. Feminism's ruined marriage, or, you know, modern life's too busy and that's ruined marriage. And the good thing we don't hear is, you know, women of my nana's generation and even still of our generation, our mum's generation, had to stay, whether it was a healthy relationship or not. I like to celebrate the fact, notwithstanding the fact the relationships are terrific, that if I have to leave at any point, I can go. Yeah. I think that's a positive.
It's not to be diminished.
But I think what also happens is that, you know, when we enter into this relationship with this person that we love, we believe that they have our best interests in heart as we do for theirs. And it takes us a long time to let go of that and to come to the realisation that maybe that's not what it is. And we give each other a second chance and a third chance and a fourth chance and a fifth chance. And we keep hoping that it'll change, that the other person will get the message about what it is that I'm saying. I look back now, when I left my marriage, the first thing my friends said to me was, "Oh, we've been waiting for this for so long." And I sort of said, "Why didn't you tell me?" And they said, "Well, it was up to you."
Yeah.
And when I look back now, do you know, I reckon I stayed 20 years too long in that marriage.
Wow, just the 20. Just the 20 years.
Yeah.
But you don't listen, do you,
Yeah,
really? If
because,
someone
you know,
says to you, "Oh, what are you doing? Get rid of that drop kick," you don't.
No.
You have to be in the position.
Yeah, and something has to happen for you.
Yeah.
Something has to switch on in here. For me, I was quite literally one night turning the corner, going down the dirt road to the property, and this thing come over me, and I just thought, if I stay here, I'm going to lose me. I'm going to lose my soul. I have to get out. And that's what I did. But it took me a long time to come to that.
Tough decision.
Mind you, life's never been better.
Yeah, good. That's good to know, and as you said, which is not to say your relationships are in peril.
No,
yes.
definitely not.
Yes.
What do you think of the fact that often people have affairs? I've had friends who have had affairs. I've had friends who have had affairs with another married person, and often I've found that what I hear is, "Oh, my marriage is much better," or "their marriage is much better." So what do you think about that?
Do you mean after the affair the marriage is better?
Yeah.
It's the only person cheating that's saying that, isn't it? It's not the person being cheated on going, "No, things are much better now."
Look, I've got a few stats around that. There's been a 40% increase in the number of women having affairs recently, so that number is on the rise. But we also know that for people that have affairs, again, 90% of people that have affairs don't end up with the person they've had the affair with. So it's usually a rather short-term moment of lust and exploration and validation and trying to overturn the lack of intimacy or lack of communication or even sexual boredom in a relationship. But it's sort of a circuit breaker, but it's not usually an entree to the next meaningful relationship. And even those that do get together from an affair, I think 70% of those don't end up together. So the stats aren't good.
And it's always amazing when couples who have got together by an affair then say, "I can't believe he cheated on me." You go, "Yeah, I don't know why you didn't see that coming." Just because you're rendezvousing at the hotel.
The time to have an affair. I truly don't.
Oh, you can squeeze it in, Nellie, if you try hard.
But who have affairs for like 20
You need some time
years?
management. Prioritising. Come and do your cupboards, your affair diary. I'm going to do the lot.
This from a woman with 4 children. Yeah,
I will finish on words of wisdom from my grandmother, who said that people started having affairs, according to her, in East Kew, when the church parish dances finished up, because she said that was the way that you, as a young married person, in your 30s. would get frocked up, dance with a handsome man who you had a bit of an eye on from the tennis club or the bowls, and he'd give you a squeeze, and it was all in front of your husband, but you walked out on cloud nine and no one needed to take it any further because you had that flirtation, and physically holding another man
was enough
for her. I mean, that's all she wanted. I don't think she wanted a knee trembler up against the fence with the jasmine shaking. She just wanted a nice man to say, your hair looks gorgeous, and her to say, well, your garden's looking top notch. That's all she wanted.
Yeah, which garden? I was thinking.
Oh, his garden where he would play with his children.
There's no gardens anymore. That's a whole other discussion.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. You've been a wonderful audience this evening. And keep the applause going for Sue Yorston, Sabina Reid and Nellie Thomas, who is obviously very funny and does have a show at the Comedy Festival, Politely Furious. Is that what it's called?
Pleasantly
Furious.
Not
Nellie
polite.
Thomas. Thank you so much. I'm George McEncroe.
And George McEncroe.
See you next time. Thank you so much.